GoForThe2.com. We're into our Week 8 predictions of the college football season. There's going to be some great games from start to finish. I can't wait to see how it plays out, so stay with me all season long. I'm going to get into the predictions just in a couple of seconds. I want to remind everybody, this coming Friday, 6:30 p.m., blogtalkradio.com, my co-host, former Georgia Bulldog wide receiver Corey Allen. We're going to discuss the key marquee matchups in the SEC. We're going to discuss the Bulldogs' loss to Missouri last weekend. We're also going to get into the preview of Georgia Vanderbilt this coming Friday on blogtalkradio.com, the NCAA Weekly Blitz Show, Friday at 6:30 p.m., so check that out. Let's get right into the predictions for this coming Saturday. There's some marquee matchups. Florida State number 5, Clemson number 3 for ACC supremacy. I'm sticking with the home team and senior quarterback Tajh Boyd. I like what Clemson was able to do defensively over the last couple of weeks. I think they're starting to gel. I think they'll be up and ready for this ball game. When you look at last week's performance, the 24-14 victory over Boston College, I know it was pedestrian, but in my opinion, Dabo Swinney and the offensive staff keeping everything vanilla for the upcoming game against the Seminoles. Jameis Winston, the freshman quarterback, going to be making a very tough road start heading up into Death Valley, and I like Clemson's chances in this ball game. I think they pick up a very hard-fought 28-24 victory at home and move one step closer to a possible BCS national championship game. Let's talk about the Big Ten right now. Michigan, they lost in 4 overtimes to Penn State. A tough game, 43-40. They had many opportunities to pick up the victory. They could not do it. They now come back home against a very high-octane offense in Indiana. But I like what Devin Gardner was able to do in the fourth quarter of that ball game. I've seen the situation many times. I think Michigan will be ready for this ball game. I think they dominate at home 35-17 over Indiana. Indiana's a team on the move. They're moving in the right direction. They're not there totally yet. It's just a very tough road environment in the Big House, and Michigan will get the 35-17 victory over Indiana. Let's stay in the Big Ten. Northwestern coming off back-to-back losses to Ohio State and Wisconsin. Last week's road game against Wisconsin, Northwestern was pushed all around the field by a very heavy offensive line by the Badgers. They now come back home to play Minnesota. These games are traditionally tough. Minnesota's a very gutty team with a very good quarterback in Philip Nelson, and I like the rushing attack by the Gophers in this ball game to keep it close. Minnesota's secondary, very solid. They'll be able to contain Kane Coulter and Trevor Siemian, both Northwestern quarterbacks. I think Northwestern will win, but it is very, very close. I'm calling for a 28-25 victory over the Gophers, but it is a lot closer than people think. Minnesota could be in a position to pull off the upset as well. Let's stay in the Big Ten. Number 4, Ohio State, coming off a bye week 2 weeks ago, beat up on Northwestern 40-30. They now play a 4-2 Iowa Hawkeye team. Both of these teams had a week off to prepare. Iowa has a very good rush defense. So does Ohio State. Both teams very methodical and balanced on the offensive side of the ball. Iowa averaging 209 passing yards per game. They're averaging 207 rushing yards per game. They have a very good running back in Mark Weissman. I like the Hawkeyes to keep this ball game close. Ohio State wins and keeps the winning streak going to 19, but it is a very close game. I'm calling for a 24-21 Buckeye victory against the Hawkeyes. These games are traditionally close over the years. I think Iowa gives Ohio State all it can handle this coming weekend. If you want to know, Ohio State does play Penn State next weekend, so could it be a possible look-ahead game for the Buckeyes? We're going to have to see. I think they're focused, but it's a very close game. 24-21, Ohio State wins. Let's talk right now, BYU on the road against Houston. BYU coming off a very impressive 38-20 victory over the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. Houston is very impressive. They're 5-0 on the year, but they haven't faced an offense and defensive line as physical as BYU. Quarterback Taysom Hill for the Cougars has the offense starting to gel, and I think the Cougars win a convincing 40-20 ball game over Houston. Houston's a very up-and-coming program, but they haven't faced a team like BYU. BYU gets a convincing 40-20 victory on the road against Houston. Let's talk about the big matchup in South Bend, the 4-2 USC Trojans and the 4-2 Notre Dame Fighting Irish. When you look at Notre Dame, they're coming off a bye week. 2 weeks ago, they had a very tough game against Oklahoma. They turned the ball over 3 times. And when you look at quarterback Tommy Rees, not a very good season. He's thrown for 13 touchdowns. He does have 6 interceptions, but it's the completion percentage, only 51.7% on the year. He struggled. When you look at USC on the flip side, they did fire Lane Kiffin. Ed Ogeron, the offensive line coach, takes over. They really have nothing to lose. Not a lot is expected out of USC the rest of the way. I think that's a positive sign for the Trojans heading up into this matchup. When you look at USC's rush defense, only giving up 107 yards per game, I think they're going to put a lot of pressure on Tommy Rees and the Notre Dame offense. I'm calling for a 28-21 USC victory on the road. When you look at this series, the last 4 games have been won by the visitor. That's a positive sign if you're a Trojan fan. I think they throw caution to the wind this weekend and pick up the 28-21 victory in South Bend against Notre Dame. Let's talk right now about LSU and Ole Miss. LSU coming off a very impressive 17-6 victory over the Florida Gators. A very gutty, typical SEC-like, grounded-out type of game by Les Miles and that staff. They wore down the Gators. They now travel on the road to Oxford. Very tough place to play. Ole Miss pushed Texas A&M to the limit last week. They were up 38-31, but they lost a 41-38 matchup to Johnny Football. Very disappointing home loss, but they have an opportunity to get right back onto the wagon right now this weekend and have a big victory against LSU. LSU has been looking very good, averaging over 45 points per game. Zach Mettenberger having a very good season. He has 2 big play wide receivers in Odell Beckham Jr. and Jarvis Landry. I just think LSU is pushed to the limit by Bo Wallace and this Ole Miss Rebel team. They're very gutty. They can push LSU into this matchup. I think LSU wins, but it is very, very close. Calling for a 31-28 victory by LSU. They get pushed to the limit by Ole Miss. Stay with me all season long. It's going to be a great weekend of college football, and I can't wait to give it to you.